how big can a human body actually get before it stops making sense? These are the biggest bodybuilders ever. Men who push size so far that other elite pros looked small the second they stood next to them. Bodies so extreme that even people who knew nothing about bodybuilding stopped and stared. These are the men who found out exactly how far the human frame can go. Markus Rühl. Markus Rühl looked like somebody took a normal bodybuilder and kept adding muscle long after common sense should have stepped in. At about 5 feet 10 inches, he was not towering over people the way some giants did, but he carried so much size that height stopped mattering. In the off-season, he weighed about 310 to 326 pounds. On stage, he was generally around 265 to 291 pounds, depending on the year. His arms were about 24 in, his chest around 60 in, his waist around 38 in, and his thighs around 33 to 35 inches. That is why fans still talk about him like a comic book character who somehow became real. What makes his story even better is how normal it started. Markus was born in Germany in 1972. He did not begin as a giant. At about 18, he hurt his left knee playing soccer, and a doctor told him to build up his leg muscles. At that point, he reportedly weighed only about 120 pounds. That advice changed everything. He threw himself into training, packed on size at a crazy rate, and within a few years had turned from a skinny young man into one of the most shocking physiques bodybuilding had ever seen. Before bodybuilding became his full-time life, he also worked regular jobs, including selling used cars and office work, which makes the change even more wild when you see what he later became. The reason Markus still stands out is simple. He never looked like he was trying to be neat or pretty. He looked like he wanted to be as huge as possible. His delts were massive. His traps were thick. His chest looked loaded from top to bottom. And his most muscular pose made him look almost unreal. Fans loved him for that. He was not the kind of bodybuilder people admired from a distance for perfect polish. He was the kind that made people lean forward because they could not believe what they were seeing. His biggest moment came in 2002 at the Night of Champions. He showed up around 12 pounds on stage, huge and ripped, and won the show with one of the freakiest looks of that whole era. He later placed 5th at the 2004 Mr. Olympia, which became his best Olympia finish. Roelly Winklaar. Roelly Winklaar did not look big in the normal bodybuilding way. He looked packed. At about 5 feet 6 inches, he carried the kind of size that made taller men seem small standing next to him. In the off-season, he weighed around 320 pounds. On stage, he came in around 295 pounds. His arms were measured at about 24 in with a waist around 35 inches. And that is a huge part of why people could not stop staring at him. He did not have the long stretched look of a taller giant. He looked like muscle had been packed into every open space on his frame. That is what made him so shocking the first time people saw him. His story gave that size even more weight. Roelly was born in Curaçao in 1977. When he was 4 years old, his father died in a motorcycle accident. Not long after that, his mother moved the family to Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Life was not easy and bodybuilding did not become his path right away. The real turn came after a serious car crash that nearly killed him. After that, he got much more serious about training and linked up with Sybil Peters, the coach who helped shape his rise. Roelly had already shown promise, but now there was direction behind the power. He was no longer just a big man in the gym. He was becoming a real threat. When his career took off, it happened fast. He won the Arnold Amateur in 2009 and earned his pro card. Then, in just his third pro show, he won the New York Pro in 2010. Over the next few years, he kept building his name with wins at shows like the Nordic Pro, Chicago Pro, and Prague Pro. But what made Roelly unforgettable was not just his record. It was the look. His front double biceps pose was wild. His most muscular pose looked even crazier. Many fans still say he had some of the biggest arms ever seen in bodybuilding. And when he appeared in the film Generation Iron, even more people got to see how intense, gifted, and unpredictable he was. His best year came in 2018. He won the Arnold Classic Australia, finished third at the Mr. Olympia, and became the first people's champion when the fan vote made its debut. Jay Cutler. Now, let's give it up big for this guy because he is a champion, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hear IT from Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler was the kind of bodybuilder who looked huge, even in a sport built on huge men. At about 5 feet 9 inches, he was not the tallest man on this list, but he packed so much muscle onto his frame that he looked like a walking wall. In the off-season, he was usually around 290 to 310 pounds. On stage, he came in around 260 to 275 pounds. He also carried the kind of measurements that made people stop and stare. Around 21 to 22 inches arms, a 58-inch chest, and a 34 inches waist. What made Jay stand out was not just that he was big. It was how clean and complete that size looked. His shoulders were broad, his chest was full, his back was thick, and his legs became one of the biggest talking points of his whole career. Those quads looked massive, even next to other top pros. And later, they helped create his most famous image, the quad stomp. Jay did not have the wild, messy look some mass monsters had. He looked put together, and that helped him win. His story also made him easy to root for. He grew up in Massachusetts and started working in his brother's concrete business at just 11 years old. That hard work showed up later in the way he trained and carried himself. He started lifting seriously at 18, studied criminal justice in college, and once planned to work as a corrections officer before bodybuilding took over. His first contest came in 1992, and by 1996, he had won the NPC Nationals and earned his pro card. From there, he kept getting bigger, better, and harder to ignore. Then came the long chase. Jay won the Arnold Classic 3 straight years from 2002 through 2004. But the bigger story was Ronnie Coleman. Jay kept running into him at the Mr. Olympia and kept finishing second. The second-place finisher, Jay Cutler. Most people would have cracked after that. Jay did not. He stayed with it, kept building, and finally broke through in 2006. He won again in 2007, lost the title to Dexter Jackson in 2008, then came back in 2009 and did something nobody had ever done before. He won the Mr. Olympia back after losing it. He won a 4th title in 2010 and finished with 6 Olympia runner-up finishes, the most ever. Günter Schlierkamp. Günter Schlierkamp was not just big. He was tall, broad, and full in a way that made other heavyweights look smaller the second he stood beside them. He was about 6 feet 1 inch and a half with an off-season weight around 325 to 330 pounds and a contest weight around 295 to 300 pounds. That kind of size is rare by itself. On a taller frame, it looked even more unreal. He did not have to do much to get attention. His body did that the second he walked out. His story started far from the bright lights of American bodybuilding. Günter was born in Olin in what was then West Germany, and he grew up on a farm. That matters because his whole rise had that hard-working feel to it. He was not built in fame. He came up through years of work, won the German championships, then the European Amateur Championships, and then took the biggest step of his early career by winning the IFBB World Amateur Championships in 1993. That one gave him his pro breakthrough, and a few years later, he moved to the United States to chase the sport at the highest level. What made Günter special was the kind of size he carried. A lot of huge bodybuilders looked thick because they were shorter and more compact. Günter was different. His mass stretched across a taller frame, which made his shoulders, chest, back, and arms look enormous in a different way. He looked like a real giant, not just a very heavy man. But he was not only about scale. Fans loved him because he had a friendlier, cleaner look than some of the more extreme mass monsters. That is a big reason people started calling him the Gentle Giant. He looked huge, but he also looked open, balanced, and easy to cheer for. The biggest moment of his whole career came in 2002. First, he pushed into the top group of the Mr. Olympia and showed one of his best looks ever. Then not long after that, he did something almost nobody else could say they had done in that era. He beat Ronnie Coleman at the GNC Show of Strength. Ronnie was in the middle of his Olympia reign, and that loss ended up being the only time he was beaten on stage during that run. He never became Mr. Olympia, but he stayed near the top for years. He finished 4th at the 2004 Arnold Classic and 4th again at the 2005 Mr. Olympia, which showed that his 2002 breakout was not a fluke. Paul Dillett looked less like a normal bodybuilder and more like somebody had pushed size way past the point where it should have stopped. Standing around 6 feet 2 inches, he carried the kind of mass that could take over a stage before he even hit a pose. In the off-season, he was usually around 320 to 330 pounds. On stage, he came in around 285 to 290 pounds. That alone put him in rare company. But it was not just the scale. He had huge shoulders, giant arms, a massive chest, and the kind of upper body width that made other pros look smaller the second he stood next to them. In the 1990s, very few men looked more shocking at first glance. His path into bodybuilding made that size even more interesting. Paul was born in Montreal to a French father and a Jamaican mother. Before bodybuilding took over his life, he played football in the Canadian Football League. That matters because he did not come into the sport as a thin kid trying to build himself up from nothing. He already had real power and a strong athletic base. Then bodybuilding took that frame and turned it into something far bigger. He won the heavyweight class and overall title at the North American Championships in 1992. And that opened the door to the pro stage. Once he got there, people noticed him fast because nobody else looked quite like him. What made Paul unforgettable was the way his body looked, almost too large for the sport around him. He was not known for being the neatest poser or the most polished man on stage. He was known for raw visual power. Fans gave him names like Freak Einstein and Jurassic Paul because normal words did not seem big enough. When he hit a pose, the first thing people saw was width, thickness, and pure scale. That is a huge reason his name still comes up whenever people talk about the wildest mass monsters ever. Even people who never watched his whole career know the look. They remember the shock of seeing him. His big early pro splash came in 1993 when he placed 4th at the Arnold Classic and 6th at the Mr. Olympia. A year later came one of the most talked about moments of his career. At the 1994 Arnold Classic, severe cramping from dehydration hit him on stage so badly that officials had to carry him off. It was frightening, and it became one of the most famous stage incidents in bodybuilding history. But Paul kept going. He later placed 4th at the 1994 Mr. Olympia, 5th at the 1996 and 1997 Olympias, and then won the Night of Champions in 1999. Daniele Seccarecci. When it came to contest weight, almost nobody reached what Daniele Seccarecci reached. He was officially recognized as the heaviest competitive male bodybuilder, coming in at 135 kilograms or 297.62 pounds in contest shape. Outside contest shape, he normally weighed about 150 kilograms or roughly 330 pounds. That alone tells you what kind of body this man carried. He had giant arms measuring about 55 centimeters, which is roughly 21.7 inches. Even in a sport full of huge men, Daniele looked built on a different scale. His story started in Italy. He was born in Levo and later moved with his family to Syracuse. He got into weight training at about 16, not because he was chasing bodybuilding fame yet, but because he wanted to improve his judo. That did not last long. Within a year, he was already competing in local bodybuilding shows, and the results came fast. In 2000, he won the Venice Beach Grand Prix, and over the next few years, he kept building his name in junior and national contests. He was not one of those bodybuilders who came from a famous gym or a giant media machine. He built his way up through contests, size, and steady results until people had no choice but to notice him. What made Daniele different was that his whole identity in bodybuilding was tied to raw mass. A lot of big bodybuilders are remembered for one body part, one famous pose, or one classic win. Daniele is remembered because he brought record book body weight into contest condition. He appeared on major television in Italy, showed up on primetime record shows, and became known far beyond the usual bodybuilding crowd. His career had real competitive moments, too. He turned pro at 26, and in his first pro season came close to qualifying for the Mr. Olympia. He later competed in shows across Europe and the United States. And his last contest was the 2013 Nordic Pro in Finland, where he placed 6th. Just days later, he died of a heart attack at only 33 years old. You know, if they come at 270, they got a 34-inch waist, you know? So, I'm still the bigger man. But, you know, I do have some areas my back has improved tremendously. And, you know, I'm just going to go back to the drawing board. And Nasser El Sonbaty. Nasser El Sonbaty should not have been able to move the way he did. At about 5 feet 11 inches, he carried the size of a true mass monster, but somehow still kept shape, balance, and clear detail. In the off-season, he usually weighed over 300 pounds and at times reached as high as 338 pounds. On stage, he came in around 265 to 290 pounds. His arms were around 22 in, his chest around 58 in, and his waist around 34 inches. Most men who got that big started to lose control of their look. Nasser often still had visible abs, broad shoulders, and a body that looked dangerous from every angle. His background made him even more interesting. Nasser was born in Stuttgart, Germany to an Egyptian father and a Yugoslav mother. He was not just known for his body, he was known for his mind, too. He studied history, political science, and sociology at the University of Augsburg, and he spoke several languages including German, Arabic, English, French, Italian, Spanish, and Serbo-Croatian. That is where his nickname came from. He often wore his round glasses while training, and sometimes even while posing, which made him even more memorable. In a sport filled with loud personalities, Nasser stood out by being huge, smart, calm, and completely different from everybody else around him. Who do you want to beat most? No, I don't want to be any no-cartoon characters. He began bodybuilding in the early 1980s and slowly built himself into one of the most feared men of the 1990s. By the time he hit the pro stage, people could already see he was not just another big bodybuilder. He had the size to overwhelm a lineup, but he also had enough shape to make that size look clean. He finished third at the Mr. Olympia in 1995 and again in 1996, which set up the biggest moment of his career. Then came the 1997 Mr. Olympia. Nasser brought the kind of look that made fans think the title was finally his. He finished second behind Dorian Yates, but that result never stopped being argued about. A lot of people believe Nasser should have won that night. He kept proving he belonged with the very best. He qualified for 10 straight Mr. for Olympia contests, entered 9 of them, and in 1999 he won the Arnold Classic after finishing runner-up there twice before. Ronnie Coleman. At about 5 feet 11 inches, Ronnie Coleman carried the kind of weight that should not have looked that sharp on a human body. In the off-season, he was usually around 315 to 330 pounds. On stage, he came in around 287 to 300 pounds. He also had the kind of measurements that made his body sound almost made up. About 24 inches arms, a 60 inches chest and back, and 36 inches thighs. But what made Ronnie truly scary was not just the size. It was the fact that he brought that size with detail, hardness, and balance that almost nobody else could match. His rise made it even better. Ronnie was born in Monroe, Louisiana, earned a degree in accounting from Graham-Ling State University, played football there as a walk-on middle linebacker, and then moved to Texas. He could not find work as an accountant, so he ended up working as a police officer in Arlington. He was working long shifts like a regular man while building one of the greatest physiques the sport had ever seen. He turned pro in the early 1990s, kept improving year after year, and then in 1998, he broke through and won the Mr. Olympia. From there, he did not let go. He won that title 8 straight times from 1998 through 2005 and finished his career with 26 IFBB pro wins. What made Ronnie feel almost unreal was the way he trained. He was not one of those bodybuilders who only looked strong. He really was strong. He became famous for throwing around 800 pounds in the squat, 800 pounds in the deadlift, and a 2,300 pounds leg press that still looks crazy even now. That is a huge part of why his legend grew beyond bodybuilding fans. Then there was the way he looked at his peak. By 2003 and 2004, he had become the kind of champion who made other top bodybuilders look unfinished. His back looked like armor. His legs looked carved out of stone. His famous shouts in the gym became part of sports culture, and they stuck because the body behind them was even louder. When Ronnie was at his best, he did not just beat people. He made the gap look unfair. There's a reason so many people still call him the greatest bodybuilder ever. In 2001, he became the first man to win the Arnold Classic and the Mr. Olympia in the same year. Greg Kovacs. Greg Kovacs looked like the point where bodybuilding size stopped making sense. He stood about 6 feet 5 inches, and at his biggest, he weighed around 420 pounds in the offs. In contest shape, he weighed somewhere between 330 and the mid-300s. His arms were measured at over 25 inches. His chest was around 70 inches, and his thighs were about 35 inches. Those are the kind of numbers that sound fake until you see the pictures. Greg was not just another big bodybuilder. He looked like a giant, even in a sport full of giants. He was born in Niagara Falls, Ontario in 1968. Before bodybuilding took over his life, he played hockey and soccer and studied electrical engineering for a year in college. That makes the next part even crazier because he did not start out looking like some strange one-in-a-million giant. He built into that. By the second half of the 1990s, people were already talking about him as the biggest pro bodybuilder around. In 1996, he earned his IFBB pro card by winning the Canadian National Championships. Then in June of 1997, he landed on the cover of Flex magazine, and that helped to turn him from a huge man in bodybuilding circles into one of the most talked about mass monsters in the sport. What made Greg different was not only the body weight, it was the way that much size sat on such a tall frame. Most mass monsters looked huge because they were thick and packed tightly. Greg was tall and still unbelievably heavy, which made him feel even more extreme. And he was not just big, he was also known for shocking strength. He could bench 700 pounds for 2 reps, shoulder press 500 pounds, row 500 pounds bent over, and leg press over 2,000 pounds. He looked like the size race had gone too far. And that is exactly why people never forgot him. The strange part of Greg's story is that his contest results never matched his measurements. He competed as a pro, but he never became a top Olympia-level threat. His best-known placings included 16th at the 1997 Night of Champions, 16th at the 1998 Ironman Pro, 13th at the 2004 Arnold Classic, and then he stepped away from competition in 2005. That contrast is a huge part of his legend. Greg Kovacs was not the greatest bodybuilder on this list when it came to titles, but when the question is pure size, raw body mass, and how far the human frame could be pushed before it started to look unreal, his name is impossible to beat. He died in 2013 after a heart attack at 44. Big Ramy. Big Ramy did not look big in the normal bodybuilding way. He looked overwhelming. Standing around 5 feet 10 inches to 5 feet 11 inches, he carried the kind of size that made even other heavyweights seem small. He was usually listed at about 310 pounds in the off-season and around 295 pounds on stage. In some later off-season stretches, reports pushed him even higher into the mid-30s. His legs looked huge, his back looked massive, and his lats were so wide that his whole frame seemed to spread across the stage. When Big Ramy stood in a lineup, he did not need to do much to get attention. The size did that for him. His story makes that size even more wild. Big Ramy was born Mambu El Spi in Capra El Sheikh, Egypt. And before bodybuilding took over his life, he worked as a fisherman. Then he moved to Kuwait, and that is where everything changed. He started training seriously around 2009, joined Oxygen Gym in 2010, and grew at a speed that did not seem normal. By 2012, he stepped on the Amateur Olympia Kuwait stage at about 286 pounds and earned his pro card by winning the overall title. Then came one of the strongest pro debuts bodybuilding had seen in years. In 2013, he entered the New York Pro for his first IFBB Pro League show and won it right away. That was the moment the whole sport realized this was not just another big man coming through. This was a real force. What made Big Ramy different from a lot of older mass monsters was that he was not only huge. At his best, he could carry that size without looking like the whole body was falling apart. He had giant quads, a huge upper back, thick arms, and enough shape to make the mass look even more dangerous. Over the next few years, he kept building that reputation. He won the New York Pro again in 2014, won the Arnold Classic Brazil in 2015, and kept climbing at the Mr. Olympia until he finished second in 2017. For years, people kept asking the same question. If a man this huge ever truly nailed his peak shape at the biggest show, who was supposed to stop him? That answer finally came in 2020. Big Ramy won the Mr. Olympia and became the first Egyptian ever to take bodybuilding's biggest title. Then he came back in 2021 and won it again, proving it was not a one-time shock. Thank you for joining us. Feel free to click on one of the cards on the screen to watch another video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.